Okay, I'm back onto this Sony amplifier. The customer's given the go-ahead to spend a bit more time on it, so I'm going to clean up all the corrosion on the board here, or at least the worst of it. I'm not sure how we'll go with the links and stuff, see what they turn out like once I've given it a scrub, but I think I'll remove these couple of filter caps and the relay and the two drive ICs. Also some of these rusty screws I'll replace them with something a bit cleaner. I could almost remove the whole board from the unit here, might be even easier come to think of it. Looks like there's only a couple of screws holding the heatsink. The screws on the circuit board, which I want to take out anyway because most of them are rusty. A couple of plugs, 3 plugs by the look of it. Remove this other board off the end, which might mean I'm going to take the back off. But I think for ease of working, might as well just disassemble the whole thing. Yeah, I don't think that board will come out without taking the back cover off. So I might just grab the screwdriver and do this by hand. Actually, it's going to take a while, so I might grab a drill and do it. Just unearth, or do I need to take that out? I'm not sure what that screw is. And that comes out. So there's one silver screw in the speaker terminals for some reason, and a bunch in these RCAs, there's black ones. Oh, one silver one at the bottom for the phono. Oops. Yeah, this bit is not the best one for, really need to seat it first. For doing these sort of screws, I usually have a better screwdriver bit than that one's more for wood screws. So if we disconnect the back, disassemble the back, this board should now, besides the actual thing going to the mode switch, or the input, is the input selector? Yeah. This should just unplug, so we can just leave that sort of floating for now. I could undo the knob and take that right out. Maybe I even should do that again. Already had it out once. If you remove the mode knob and the nut behind it, we can remove that circuit board completely. I guess I should give that a check over, but I don't think there's any corrosion on that. I'll just put that nut back on there so you know where that is when you need it again. Threads will line up. Yeah, and that board's got no sign of corrosion. Whoops, I'm banging that around the place. Another thing to check is for dry joints on these input sockets, or some are output I guess, but mostly input sockets. And they all look pretty damn good. Sometimes it doesn't have to resolder those, but those are in perfect condition by the look of it. We've got a couple of plugs here off to the power and speakers and stuff. Also this ribbon cable that I had a bit of trouble with before getting it to go back in for some reason. And then yeah, these rather rusty little screws, which I'll find some others out of some old unit. I used to have hundreds of these, but I got rid of them years ago. But find something that disassembling for parts and just salvage those out of it, because they're all rusty as on the top. Not that it matters that much, but this one that has got an earth pad on it, I want to clean that up and get that connected again, just in case it makes some sort of, if it's a bad connection, it might get noisy or something, make some sort of noise into the amp. Probably won't, but best to fix that up. Anyway, probably the phono earth might come back through that as well. That screw's getting pretty white and corroded. I haven't done the heatsink, have I? So quite a simple thing. Like most Sonys, they're designed to be worked on, always nicely put together so that they can be, I guess, easily assembled in the factory, but also easily repaired. Sony's one of those companies that manages to make them both of those things. There we go. Get that screw out of there before I lose it. So I can get rid of this main chassis. Bit of rust here, I think I'll scratch that off later. All the other boards look to be perfectly fine. So I can get rid of the main chassis for now. And now we can focus on this board. And all the grot, it's very dirty generally. I might just get a brush and brush all the dust. It's almost got some sort of bits of pollen off a tree, or looks a bit like off a gum tree or something. Little fine bits of something. Little fibrous sort of things. Ew, what have we got a lump of there? Oh, that wasn't there before, I don't think. Yuck. Bit of rust on the corner there. This whole thing could do with a quick dust off. And that looks like another bit that should be a bit of an earthing point onto the chassis. Yeah, I just scraped the rust off that. It's got little solder blobs on it. Could possibly do with a resolder, but that should be enough anyway, I think. I don't know if they really, but they've obviously made it so that those ones haven't even got solder on them. Some are still copper. Yeah, that one doesn't even have a connection to it. So what the main thing I want to do is get rid of those two chips off the board. And I mean, I've been doing this stuff for years, so I can sort of recognise the shapes of things. That joint looked a little dry on it, but that was the couple that I didn't resolder because they're not connected to anything. But yeah, one of the skills you need to learn if you're doing a lot of this is to be able to spot the parts on the underside without having to keep flipping over. And obviously once the board's out like this, it's pretty easy to flip the board over and find where the part's located, but a lot of things you're working on a big TV chassis or something that may not be easy to move around. So you want to be able to spot parts quickly. That joint there's dry, or very close to it. On a little link, I think it is, or maybe a resistor or something. Oh yeah, so that's where possibly the corrosions come down through. They'll often make the joint a bit dry. So that could be what is that? Yeah, that's this link here next to the chip. So that may even need replacing. Oops. Helps if you reset the thing. But I've never really bothered with a desoldering station. These hand desolderers are pretty quick and less hassle in a lot of ways. But there's a bit of green around the heatsink, but it doesn't look like much has happened to the actual chip itself, so probably don't even need to remove the chip from the heatsink. Although probably, let's have a look, does it have any heatsink paste on it? Probably best to remove it and look. Just get an idea what the condition, but yeah, it doesn't look like it's soaked in badly or anything. And I wouldn't be surprised if just a bit of my metho's disappeared, because I know I had it the other day. Just a bit of metho will clean that, hopefully. So, give a quick idea of how bad the corrosion is, and this is just wiping off basically, so it isn't too bad. A little bit on the pins here. May need something a little bit more abrasive to get rid of it, but it would be nice to remove all corrosion just in case that's a sign there is some sort of chemical or something on there. So it doesn't seem to be any heatsink paste on this. So I think we're going to have to use a bit of scourer or something, which of course I've looked at as well. So I'll use a bit of this green kitchen scourer and cut off bits and pieces to suit. It's good for this sort of stuff. You need a little bit more harshness, but not too much. And that should remove all that verdigris. It actually makes the cloth look quite pretty. So it does polish rather well. And just use a bit of paper towel or something to remove the other muck. Could do with a little bit more. The harsher bits you might need to scrape a bit with a screwdriver. Again, I'm just worried that there's some sort of chemical residue here. Probably isn't. It's probably just fresh water by the look of it, but just in case there's anything corrosive in there. That might keep corroding later. I mean, this thing will be kept in a nice warm home, so it should be alright, but still best to clean everything up. A little bit of muck on the back of that chip might just need a bit of scourer where it's got some sort of coppery coloured stuff on it. But generally that's pretty good. There's a little fine screwdriver. Just scrape a couple of little bits of green stuff off the legs there. Yeah, that's pretty nice. A little bit on the back, but it hasn't eaten into the coating. You'd see I think they're copper, these leads normally. Sometimes they can be steel or something, but you either have rust or like bare copper if it's really eaten in. But the fact it hasn't eaten into that is a very good sign that it's not too bad. So that's a relief. I was a bit worried these might have been damaged, but turns out they seem to be okay, which is pretty good because they're not the cheapest things to buy. And you know, you go buying too many parts, you're going to exceed the value of the amp fairly quick. So I'll leave that off because I want to clean the board. The relay I think is something worth removing just in case that's had anything pooling under it, and they are another place you sometimes get dry joints. So it won't have to resolder all those joints properly. And now that's perfectly clean. Yeah, no sign of anything getting underneath it, so this hasn't been too wet by the look of it. Guess I should always check this amp hasn't been plugged in for, I don't know, quite a while. Week or two now probably. But always best just to check these filter caps. Make sure there's no voltage on them. And as you can see, there's less than a volt. But if the amp's not pulling any power, if you've got a 40 amp or something, they can stay charged for, you know, weeks and be a potential shock hazard. Probably need to turn the soldering iron up a bit for these. These are going to suck a lot of heat. Don't really need to remove them, but it'll probably just make the board a bit easier to clean without them on there. Very big terminals on them. Sort of thing you usually get one terminal loose. Although these are, I think, glued on as well, so you've got to be careful. Some of these are really well attached to the circuit board with the glue. So you've got to be careful you don't crack the board or anything trying to shake them loose. Gotta love these hackos, they certainly put the heat in. Very good soldering iron, but yeah, maybe they are really well. Yeah, they're probably, with that white glue, maybe they're a bit too well glued down. Might be able to cut them with a knife. Yeah, it's the real hard glue. I don't know that it's really worth the bother. Would have been nice to get the board clean under there or around there. No, I think we'll give those a miss. A little bit too much risk of damaging the board. Probably should have left it with, there's not really that many screws in there. Even if it was screwed into the chassis, it's going to flex a fair bit trying to get them off, I think. So you could cut it with a knife or a little Dremel or something, maybe with a little cutting wheel, if you really had to get these off, but I don't really have to get them off. The other chip I'll definitely get off and give it clean. Another one of these odd staggered pin things. No idea what they call these packages, but they probably got a particular name. They're not single inline or dual inline, they're, don't know what they are, dual not inline, I guess. Oops. Bump the damn camera again. One or two hanging on still, or are they? Oh, they're coming, I think. One there, maybe. Yeah, that was the bugger. And this one's actually in cleaner condition than the other one, so I've already cleaned up the worst of them. So that's a good sign. Yeah, no heatsink paste whatsoever. A little bit of green verdigris on the back of that one. But yeah, generally I'll just give the whole chip a clean around the top and stuff where it may have had something falling on it, just in case, like I say, if there's some sort of corrosiveness left in whatever it is. And just remove any of the green stuff, because that should scrape away any residue of anything on there, but it's really not a big problem. And we'll just give that heatsink a clean up again. That's hardly got a thing on it, but we'll get rid of it anyway. And just like that, she's clean again. Wrong screwdriver. So I've got a little bit of green stuff still left on the corner there. That's what worries me, when you see a bit of green on between the case of the chip and the heatsink part sticking out of it. It's always a bad sign that it's had a fair bit of corrosion, but I don't think this got down inside the case at all. So that one was over that side. That's with the board facing that way. I don't need to worry about the bridge rectifier. There's a few resistors here and stuff that don't look the best. It's mostly just in the dust. To be honest, that heatsink almost looks like it's got a little bit of mouldy stuff or something on it. I don't know what that is, some sort of, I don't think it's corroded, but just some sort of muck on it. Maybe something was growing on there a bit. You'd hope not, but anything's possible. But yeah, it all just, it does look a little bit like there could be a little tad of mould, or maybe it's just some sort of dirt or something that's dropped in there. This seems to come off fine, so that's the main thing. Now I should have an old toothbrush here somewhere. Yeah, she's seen better days, that one. I chopped that down the sides for some reason. There is some new ones here somewhere, which I think this will do the job though. But I normally just get in and give it a scrub, and just use something like a bit of paper towel to dry up and remove what you've loosened. Yeah, those links are coming up. Those ones at least fairly clean. Interested to see if the other ones lose the verdigris and stuff on them. Probably not so much, they're in worse condition. Yeah, some of them are coming up quite clean, other ones still a bit green. But generally you just work your way around the board doing this. Try not to damage any components, obviously. You'll probably bend a few slightly and can bend them back again. And just checking everything as you go. This is a good chance to sort of focus on each little area of the board. And just look for any components that are really corroded. So far they're all not too bad. There's a little bit on them, but no signs of deep corrosion. Some of this muck's staying on the board fairly well. Could be flux residues and stuff from the factory as well there, so that could be what that is. And sometimes you just need to get in with a paper towel or something, cotton buds just in behind things, and wipe as much of the muck off the board as you can. Most of it would just have been dust and stuff anyway, but it doesn't hurt to clean it up. It's not going to conduct electricity or anything, so it's not really that important, but mainly just in case it's corrosive or anything. And just, you know, this, even this verdigris stuff has the potential, I guess, to creep around and get across the board or between links and actually conduct a bit. Probably unlikely, but you never know when there's metals, sort of metal oxides or whatever they are. That's the one thing you do want to watch out for. But when it's just dust and stuff, it doesn't really worry anything. So I've got all the main part of the board cleaned up and measured a few resistors and things, and they all seem to be okay. So now I'll just get a bit of brasso. See if I can get this earth pad cleaned up a bit better. I may still need to scrape a bit off with a screwdriver or something. But try and get that so it makes a good contact. It's probably good enough as it is, but I might just try and get it back to brass as much as I can. It may have been originally silver coated or something, but I don't think so. But brass is good enough. If it's kept away from corrosive stuff, it's not going to be a problem. Yeah, it's not, maybe not going to come up perfect. I could, guess I could either use a bit of scourer or a bit of very fine sandpaper. And scourer worked pretty well after the brasso, just to get that back to a nice gold colour. Probably could almost use a bit of scourer on those couple of links there, which are not the prettiest. At least get them nice and copper. The board's not perfectly clean, but it's pretty good. I might just polish up a few of these other links as well. Just so we haven't got any greeny looking stuff left. Yeah, they're nice and shiny at least. And those ones, not a bad idea, just using a bit of scourer. That really brings them up nice and shiny. Really doesn't look like there's been any corrosion at all. There's a couple more behind here. in there. Maybe that one. And that one. Just to get them looking decent again. The board's not perfectly clean, but it's pretty good. There is, I think, a bit of flux residue or something in here coating it. So it'd be hard to get 100% without really scrubbing it down. But that's good enough, I think. A couple more links here are a bit iffy. Just give them a quick polish. And yeah, you'd be hard pressed to notice that this thing had ever been corroded now. Other than a few of the links are showing a bit of copper instead of the tinning. But they actually all turned out, there's one more blackened looking one there behind these capacitors. They turned out a lot better than I was expecting. Scrape all this of the muck off and maybe just a bit of scourer to polish it. And yeah, it looks a million times better. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the metal integrity on these links. The copper wire's still fine. Like I say, just some have lost their tinning. But you know, it really doesn't matter that much in this sort of an environment. Unless this guy goes and puts them out in the shed or whatever the other person did and puts them in a corrosive environment again, but then it's going to take the copper off anyway, the tin off anyway. Move any bits of paper or anything I've left there, but that board's, you know, at a casual glance you would just think it's a normal circuit board out of a normal bit of equipment, like any other little bit of dirt here and there, because it's, well, it's going on, what year was this, 93 or something, so it's getting pretty old. It's going on a sort of 30-year-old amp, this thing, so it's, God, back when I was young and if something was 30 years old, it was like something from World War II or something, so this does it. I still think of this as a modern thing. So it certainly doesn't look much different to a modern thing other than lack of surface mount components, which is a good thing if you ask me. Much prefer these through hole things. At least you can work on them and see them, and they're easy enough to work on and change and stuff. But generally this stuff was so reliable that this was the biggest risk to it, was someone not looking after it. Like this one. That's looking pretty damn good. So what I might do is start reassembling all the parts and just going over solder joints as I do. Which will probably be the main thing. Just to be honest, this whole board or large parts of it probably could do with resoldering. That's a good way to find if there are any corroded connections or bad links or resistors or something. Because if they've really had bad corrosion, they will tend to, the liquid will get down, or the corrosive material down the hole on the upside of the board, down the component lead, and actually corrode into the solder, or corrode into the lead and the solder, or between the lead and solder. So that is a problem if you get something that's badly corroded. I don't think this thing's had enough corrosion to do anything that bad, but because of what's happened to this, I wouldn't mind resoldering a lot of the joints, especially around the affected area, which is more towards these output transistors. It really doesn't take that long to go over. And these little transistors, because I wobbled them around, and because there was a little bit of corrosion on them, definitely worth going over. See that, if you hear that sort of popping, crackling sound, that can be a sign. Sometimes that's just because I've recently cleaned the board, might have just been a bit of metho or something in there, but that can be a sign that some muck's got down in there. Well, that's making a bit of a crack inside, but again that may just be because I've recently wetted the board. That's why I normally use metho or alcohol, because it evaporates quickly. It's a fairly cool night tonight, so it may not be evaporating as quick as it should. But that's why it makes a good cleaner, because it disappears again quickly. I think it's actually important to go over most of the joints on this board and just hope I don't short anything out in the process. I'll give it a check like that. As I say that, that's exactly what happens. Might get the solder sucker in there and just make sure I haven't shorted anything out there. It's all looking pretty good, but so far no sign of any particularly bad joints. Other than that one I spotted when I pulled that other chip out. That was definitely on its way to being a dry joint. But yeah, again, when you've that one there does look, there are a couple of joints on this board are definitely starting to crack ever so slightly. And given its age, certainly isn't going to hurt to, and the condition we found it in, doesn't hurt to go over some of this stuff. Just in case some liquid or something's done some damage. What was those? Was that a couple of regulator transistors or whatever they were? Yeah, those sort of cases, especially when you're poking at them. Oh, there's a couple more over there. They are definitely something that you can, if the solder's starting to go and you go poking them and bending them while cleaning the board or something, they'll definitely speed up the joints failing. So I guess we can put that relay back in too. Always check the connectors, they look pretty good. A few of these small joints aren't perfect. We've got most of the stuff. There's one of those little transistors. I'll just go over that because again this area was a bit corroded. But looking pretty good. Thankfully my eyes have held out and not too bad at still doing this. Because they're getting a bit hard to see in these sort of lighting conditions. These aren't ideal lighting conditions. Yeah, it looks even worse on the camera. These lights are a little bit too shiny here. I'll just do that bridge rectifier since I wobbled that around. Yeah, these other two transistors, they're actually ICs, so they're voltage regulators. They definitely could do with a bit of resoldering. Probably not helped by me poking around. But the joints don't look perfect on those. This one's not too bad, the other one didn't look so good. Yeah, this connector here, which makes sense because this is the connector that the other upright board plugs into. That's always the sort of point where just moving the amplifier around and flexing the case a little bit As you do, that'll flex these connectors, put some force on them, so they're a common sort of thing to fail, just through mechanical movement of the amp. Even though it's fairly stiff, it will still move a little bit and start fracturing, so a couple of the end pins on that weren't the best, but they still would have been connecting alright for now. I think yeah, that, whatever it is, a little capacitor or something, that's a little iffy. I can actually see a little bit of black under the green of the lacquer of the board there, so a little bit of water has got into some of this stuff, or whatever the corrosive stuff was. But I'm not smelling any weird smells or anything, so I'd say it was just water. If it's been something worse than water, you'll often smell a salty or something smell when you're soldering. So you know it's more than just water that corroded it. You'll get some sort of foul smell or salty smell or something from it. If it was someone's pet or something, and then you do have to worry a bit, because water will normally evaporate and leave nothing, but other things can leave residues that continue to corrode things if you're not careful. It's good to see under that relay was good, so if there was more damage I probably would have gone to the trouble of removing those big electrodes, but since they're half sealed up with that plastic glue stuff they put on them anyway, and the fact that nothing's too bad means we don't really need to bother. No point risking cracking the board or something trying to get them off, or going to the hassle of sawing or whatever, grinding through it or something, cutting it with a knife or whatever. I think we'll leave it well enough alone. Go away. Yeah, under this chip there's just the slightest bit of, couple of little black spots under the lacquer. I might even give that a scrape, but I don't think that's anything to worry about. If it's right across the track, you've got to worry a little bit more, but even then it's usually just a bit of surface corrosion on the copper, and it doesn't do any more than that. There is a little bit there right under. I might scrape through the lacquer and just make sure it hasn't eaten through the track, which it hasn't. Always just re-tin that if it wants to re-tin, which it doesn't seem to want to do. And that'll make it sort of corrosion proof. Now I've got too much solder on there. But if you scrape the lacquer off and you're worried about it, just tin the copper and that'll sort of protect it. Got a little bit of muck there, what's that stuff? And yeah, just check the upper transistors look pretty good, a little bit of dust there. Just check, make sure it doesn't look like you've bridged any solder joints or left any little bits of solder where they shouldn't be. But there was no real sign of any bad damage, which is a good thing. So yeah, that's come up pretty good. Yeah, besides a few of these just being copper coloured instead of silver coloured. Bent that one a little bit, so I'll just straighten that up. It's actually pretty good. So I think this amp can be reassembled, and really now it's just a matter of time to test to make sure I haven't added any problems to it. Oh, actually I've got to clean up this chassis a little bit and then just give it a soak test. So just run it for a while, preferably a few hours at least, maybe a whole day or something, just playing music. And make sure it doesn't, nothing fails, nothing intermittent happens, nothing happens when it's warm or whatever. shouldn't have any problems like that, but you never know. Always supposed to soak test things. Just scrape the worst of this rust off these tabs. Yeah, we're not trying to make this thing perfect, but I might even use that scourer again if I can find it. Just get rid of the worst of the rust. And then just clean it off. Get that dust out there. Blow out any bits of loose rust. Just clean off these boards as well, probably doesn't matter, but while we're in here, just clean things up and make them look a bit better. Just got a couple of metal bits holding this board in. We're going to get it in a certain way to make sure it slots in there. Yeah, and slots in on that one. Heatsink sits on a couple of tabs. Got a heatsink in right? Yeah, it seems to be. So a couple of silver screws holding the heatsink in, I think. If I can find my screwdriver. Oh, a couple of gold screws, I should say. Can't see what I'm doing there, but I'm not down in the right hole, that's for sure. Oh, I am in the right hole, but it's not biting into the chassis. Sometimes you just got to look at it, and as soon as you look at it, it works. The screwdriver is probably slightly on the wrong angle or something. Now I would like to find some cleaner screws for this. I've got any on the bench here. Some remains of VCR, old sharp VCR. Might have some screws, but they're all longer ones by the look of it. Always like to replace them with the same heads and stuff if I can, but I'm not sure if I've got some quite the same. See what I can find. A couple of these are going to be a little bit different to the originals, but they'll do the job. One more. Come on, one more screw. Guess I shouldn't have chucked them all out over the years, but that one I'll have to do, it'll be a black one. Okay, so I should get rid of those other three rusty ones. Throw them in the rubbish. Oops, stuff attached to it. Other board back in with our input selection and input sockets. I'll screw this input selector switch back on front. And now I've got that out, I might give that a quick clean around that. Clean out the dust and stuff. Let's put in behind the knob. Before I put that in, I better get that connector in again after the hassle it gave me last time. We should have done it before I put this end board in. I might actually take that end board out again. Yeah, now I can get my hand in there to properly mount it in there, so they didn't give much room on that. Plug the speakers and power back in. Get those capacitors out of the way, or whatever they are. TR something, so I don't know what they are. A little bit of paper stuck there, I don't like the look of that. That's better. Okay, now I can put it back together. And there's a knob somewhere. Good chance while these are out to actually give the knob a clean. So I can give them a clean and then before we put them back on. And around the knob hole there and front panel. And then it's a matter of getting this back panel back on. All its screws. Get the power cord in place. There's the hole. So just a matter of doing up all the screws again. There's quite a few of them. And hopefully none left over. And one screw and one hole, so that's a good sign. Perfect. Now I guess we can power this up and hope nothing blows up. If I can get the power cord undone. Something went wrong there. Oh, come on. Plugged everything back in, didn't I? Yeah, that board looks really nice and clean now. You really wouldn't know that had been corroded. See if the speaker kicks in. There it goes, just a very slow one. Source direct light still comes on, so that's a good sign. Okay, got the CD input plugged in, and then I'll just plug these speakers in. And ready to apply power to make sure the volume's down. No scratchiness from the bypass or direct switch. Both channels are there. Setting the CD a bit there because the speakers are right next to it. But everything seems to be working there. I might just try the other inputs as well. Make sure they still seem to work. Auxiliary. Go around the tuner. All seems to work. I can try the phono even though it will distort again. Where's phono on this thing? Yeah, that works. I'll just put in the tape as well and hit the tape source switch thing. Tape monitor, whatever they call it. Tape monitor. Yeah, all seems good. I'll put that back on the CD input. Get rid of the tape monitor. Yeah, no sign of scratchy switches or anything. Everything working fine, no verdigris or dirty stuff in there. It's actually come up really clean. Can't see on those heat sinks, or those two copper heat sinks of the chips, any green anymore. It's been resoldered, so I think this amp's probably as good as it's going to get. But what I need to do now is just give it a good soak test. So I might turn this up some night and have a bit of a listen to some music and just give it a run for a few hours at a decent volume. Just make sure it doesn't do anything strange, but it shouldn't do. I mean, it's a Sony, they're normally pretty good. If it survived being treated like that, then it can survive anything probably. Which way around does that go? And there's a couple of black screws for that. So I'll put this all back together. I guess I might just have a look in the menu about those trim pots, whether there's something to do with the quiescent current or some sort of setting. It is bias right, bias left, so I'd say that's what it is. So there's probably a point somewhere here where I need to measure a voltage. So I better just check those. They're pretty well sealed and they're not sort of corroded or anything, so they probably don't really need the contacts cleaning. I'm not sure if you can actually get contact cleaner down in those ones. I think they're pretty well sealed up. Possibly if you unsolder them you might be able to get something in the back. But I will just check that those are set correctly. Because I did manage to download the service manual. So I better get onto that and then yeah, I can put this back together and give it a good test run. Okay, so I've had a look at the service manual on how to set the quiescent current on this. Using the two little pots labelled bias left and right, and basically there's a couple. I've actually got the power on at the moment. You're meant to let this amp warm up for 5 minutes, and according to the manual, and then this, they show a test point, but it must be these jumper wires. There's two got test point L and two more over here, which is like jumper wire 36, 35, which has got test point right, R or right, and that's jumper wire 22 and 21. So you're looking for 4 millivolts across each one. Because these are a bit corroded, it makes them a little bit more difficult to actually connect to, but I'll put the multimeter where I can actually see it. Just being careful because this amp's live at the moment. Being careful, I've got the fluke switch to the 300 millivolt range, and I am getting a bit of variable readings off these, so it's actually better to go under the board and connect to them on this amp just because of the corrosion. So it's showing all sorts of random stuff up here, but one of them is pretty close, the other not so close. The only hassle is going to be that to adjust these pots, you ideally want to be on the top side of the board. I might just flip this over and at least find out what the real readings are. So where those test points are, they've got little round holes so you can find them easily underneath the board as well. Turn it back on. Should have probably warmed up enough now. So if I go across these jumper wires, got 6.8 on one channel, and 4, so that's spot on exactly where it needs to be on that channel. So we don't need to tweak that one, which is the one over that, so I think that is actually the, was that the left or the right? But this one's reading a little high. It's now 7.3, so it's somewhere in that vicinity. I think it was 6.9 before. It's possible these obviously may change a bit as the amp warms up, so that's probably why they tell you to leave it running with 0 volume. That's slightly higher at 4.2 now, but then again that might just be something to do with our connections here. Probably does vary a little bit, but you should really let the amp warm up for a bit. So this one might be rising slightly as it heats up. Probably not the best idea to turn it off at each time, but I don't want to risk putting my hands on something live when I'm moving this. So it's never a good idea to go and grab these amps with your hands while they're live and flip them over, because sometimes your fingers can curl up underneath and onto these circuit boards. And the same if you go the other way, you can grab the power transformer or something by its terminals and get a nasty shock out of it, so we won't do that. Relays click back in. So let's see if I can get the same sort of reading from the top side. Yes, that's that 7.6 one. That's the one we need to change. If I can get a good reading on that side, I'm happy. The other one's close enough not to be a problem. Might have to let it run a little longer and just check. That could probably be tweaked down ever so slightly. Find a screwdriver that actually fits. That one's perfect. And the next problem is trying to juggle these with, making sure you don't short onto that heatsink or something. Don't short any pins out anywhere. Now it's saying some silly thing like 2.0, so that's not correct. There we are, we're back to 7.8, but whether I can hold the multimeter leads in place, I'll have to use some clip leads or something here, especially since these are a little corroded. Makes it that little bit harder to actually get a good connection and hold it. So yeah, that's a pretty annoying design really. Even at the best of times, that's not going to be the easiest thing to hold in place. But very hard to make a connection that's showing me that 7.6. There we go. If only I could get a good... So 7.9 now. And now of course my hands are in the way, so I can't actually get to the trim pot. Thankfully it's an insulated one. Whoop. Yeah, it went down and then it didn't. I wonder if that pot's a little... Oh, we're going the wrong way. So clockwise actually turns it down. Yeah, as soon as I move the multimeter leads, I'm losing connection. So now I've pulled it right off, that won't help. It's 4.3, that's pretty damn close by the look of it. Getting it exactly on 4 is probably not going to be the easiest. I'm going to measure a 1, which is incorrect. Yeah, very difficult to do. I might even have to stand this thing on its end or something, and so I can actually get the multimeter underneath the board and adjust the pot at the same time. Ideally you almost want to solder something on here. Yeah, now I can, wow, as soon as I move, of course, it slips. So this might be the best way to do it in this particular case. Right on 4.0. So we can check that again later in case it varies a bit as it warms up. Now on the other channel, that's actually gone up to 4.8 now. Yeah, when I can actually make a contact with it. So since we warmed up a bit, I think we'll tweak that down. Oh, God, right when I get to it, the multimeter probe falls off the point, because they're not easy to get into. Of course, they're being domed solder, they're not really ideal for pressing into. Ah, you son of a gun. Yeah, certainly not made to be easy, and I don't want to risk slipping and shorting anything. Okay, so that's exactly 4. If we go back to the other channel and check it again, it's probably drifted somewhat. 4.0, 4.1, it's still pretty stable. And now I'm still having trouble making contact. When I do get there, it still seems to be 4 on this channel. So they're both pretty stable around 4. Probably doesn't have to be exactly precise, but it doesn't hurt as part of an amplifier repair to just go over, especially when it may have had some corrosion on the pots or something, to just get that bias current adjusted right. But most of them are just a simple process like that, a couple of test points and set a voltage. I think some of the older ones you may have had to set a current or something, but some of these later ones they probably made it a bit easier to do, but there's really never much to it. So now that they're set, might let this just warm up a few more minutes and check them again, and if they're still right I'll put this all back together and I'll just give it a test run, and if there's no problems it can be returned to the customer. Thanks for watching.